Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in. We're just going to wait one more minute as I can see lots of people are still coming in. We'll let the rest of the attendees dial in and then we'll get things underway. Okay, I can see lots of you are still coming in, but I'm going to get started because we've got a lot to get through today. So hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which is by Barbri and hosted today by Law Careers Vet. I'm going to hand over to today's panelists shortly, but first I'm just going to quickly run through some house rules for today. First and foremost, please use the online question tool to post any questions that you have, and our panelists will answer them during the last 15 minutes or so, and perhaps throughout as well if we have enough questions. Secondly, if you have any audio-visual problems during the presentation, please let us know by using the online question tool and we will do our best to resolve them. And finally, just to note that the recording of this session is being recorded and it will be posted online, and we will send a link to all webinar attendees tomorrow after the webinar. Also, feel free to post about the webinar on social media and don't forget to tag Barbri and LCN too. So I'm going to start by launching the poll that we usually do during our webinars, which is to ask you what stage you are at. So could you please just take a second to answer the question on the screen, so we will have an idea of where you are at, and our panelists will be able to have a clearer idea. So if you just give one more second or so. Okay, I'm just going to close it in a couple of seconds just so I can see. I think everybody's pretty much filled that out. So, as expected, we have a lot of second and third year law students, but we actually have more graduates and people who are in work. So that might kind of help our panelists today. And we also have one more poll which we want to ask you, which is how confident are you in understanding the SQE and what it means for your legal career? Are you very confident? Are you quite confident? Somewhere in the middle? Are you not confident, or do you know nothing? And that is absolutely fine if you know nothing. That is why we are here today. But it'd just be good to get an idea of where you are and how you feel about the SQE. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to answer that, and then I can share the results. Okay, I'm going to close that and share that. So we have a few people who are very confident, which is great, but most people are somewhere in the middle or not confident, and a few know nothing, which is good to know, and that is why we are here today. So I'm now going to hand over to our panelists. We have Mayambo Kasweshi and Tracy Savage. Mayambo, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you, Bethany. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending. Hopefully we can answer as many questions as we can. However, if you've got any questions as we're going through, please don't hesitate to pop them in the chat question function below, and we'll try to get through as many of those as we can towards the end. So I'm going to kick this off by asking our first question to Tracy, which is, what will you get as part of the Barbri SQE Prep course, and how is it different to other courses on the market?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the Barbri SQE Prep course is completely encompassing. That's the first thing that I would say. So you don't need any other resources. You don't need any other textbooks or access to databases. It comes as a complete sort of box package, if you see what I mean. Everything that you actually need to get through the course and get through the exam is actually enclosed within our course. You will get textbooks, and in fact, I can give you a picture of them. They've actually arrived today for my textbooks. So you will get 2 textbooks in hard copy, but the vast majority of our course is all available online. So we run it through an electronic learning system. We call it the PSP, the Personal Study Plan. So that's similar to the sort of things that you might have had at university. You know, you might have had Moodle or Elite or Blackboard or something like that. So all of our materials are available through the PSP. You will get electronic copies of all of those books that I just showed you that you can actually make notes in, and you can highlight and you can write down the side of if you have got a stylus style device. You also get lectures which are available 24/7 online on the system, and then you also get hundreds and hundreds of multiple choice question practices to do, and you also get access to a mentor who will be your support tutor to actually get you through the course. So with our course, everything is there. And the other thing that I would say that's very different to other types of learning management systems that you might have had, things like Moodle and that type of thing, is that it's really, really easy to use. So what happens is that you will actually click on to your PSP, your personal study plan, by using your login details. And then as soon as you open it, the opening page actually sets out exactly what you have to do that day. So it gives you a list of tasks to do that day. It tells you how long we expect that to take you. It also tells you, it's quite scary, I suppose, it has a countdown to the exam, so number of days that you've actually got to the exam, and it tells you how much work you've got to do and whether or not you're actually on track immediately on that opening page. And then all you have to do is just click on the first task, takes you straight to it, the next task, and so on. So there's no juggling around as you might have had at university, where you've got to look at your timetable, then you've got to go and find the lectures in one particular source, then you've got to go and find your textbook and read that, then you might have to do something else, or you know, write an essay or whatever, and they're all stored in different places for different subjects. You might have to go to business to look at one thing, you might have to go to property to look at another thing. You don't have to do that with our system. It's all there for you. The only disadvantage I would say for that is if you're one of those serial procrastinators that all you want to do is make lists and never actually do any work, you don't really have that opportunity with our course, because effectively we've done the list for you and it is just there. You have to do this, then you have to do this, and you have to do this. So it's very, very easy. It's very user friendly. It's available for you whenever you want to work, anywhere in the world, at any time zone, that type of thing, because you can just access it wherever you are online.
Sounds good. And the next question we've got here is LPC versus SQE. Which one should you go for?
Okay, well, first of all, it will depend on whether or not you have a choice, because depending on where you are in your route through to qualification in the profession, you might still have a choice about whether or not you can do the LPC or whether or not you have to do the SQE. So if you have a choice between LPC and SQE, it's going to depend on things like where you're going to practice or you're hoping to practice. So if, for example, you're lucky enough to be sponsored by a law firm, so if in your sort of second or third year at university you're lucky enough to be offered what is currently a training contract, will become what's called qualifying work experience, but you're actually offered a job by a law firm who will actually sponsor your training, then they will choose for you, because they will have a package with a provider. So we have some law firms that we're actually working with to get through get their students through the SQE. There are other providers out there as well that will be doing the same thing. So if you're actually sponsored by a law firm, you might not have the choice, because basically you take their job offer, they will say, right, we want you to do your SQE prep with BARBRI or with University of Law or BPP or something like that. If you actually have the choice, then you've got to consider what is going to be right for you, and you've got to look at the differences between the various different courses and what will actually, you know, be the best fit for you. And some things which would be a factor of why to choose the SQE would be, I think, cost and flexibility. So with SQE, the costs are going to potentially, depending on which provider you actually choose, but the cost will be much lower, particularly if you're a non-law graduate, because there is now no need for the SQE to do a conversion course. So you don't have to do the GDL anymore if you actually want to qualify using the SQE. So that obviously saves you a huge amount of cost of doing a whole program there. The SQE exams are split. So you do SQE1, once you've passed that, you then do SQE2. So there's no longer a requirement to do a preparation course that sits across a whole academic year and to actually commit to the financial implications of doing a 1-year academic course or a 2-year part-time course actually at the start. Instead, you can commit to doing your SQE1 preparation course, you can then sit your SQE1 exams, and then you can go on and do SQE2. So that gives you much more flexibility to earn as you learn if you're a self-funded student. So you can work after you've finished university and then do your preparation course. You can work whilst you're doing your preparation course. You can work between SQE1 and SQE2, and then obviously after SQE2. So it's much more flexible than the traditional LPC route, which is very limited usually to the academic year. I know there are accelerated courses and so on at various providers, but generally it's limited to the academic year. You have to sign up for it straight away and commit for that whole year with those huge amounts of cost to actually pay. So I think the flexibility and the cost are definitely big advantages for the self-funded student on SQE.
Perfect. Hope that answered a few questions under choosing which route to take. The next one is, do you need a GDL to qualify under the SQE?
And no, you don't. So to qualify under the SQE route, you need to have a degree, or any degree. So that can be a degree in law, it can be a degree in another subject, it can be a foreign degree, so long as it's of equivalence of a UK undergraduate degree, and as well as a degree, it could also be an equivalent qualification. So that could be, say, an apprenticeship that's up to the appropriate level. So you have to have a degree or equivalent qualification in any subject. It doesn't have to be in law. Then you also have to pass the SQE1, SQE2, so you have to pass both of those sets of examinations, and you have to do what's called qualifying work experience, 2 years qualifying work experience, and then finally you have to pass the character and suitability requirements to be a solicitor, which is usually not a problem for the vast majority of people. That's basically that you don't have any criminal convictions, that sort of thing. But there's no requirement under SQE to have either a law degree or a graduate diploma in law.
Perfect. And the next one is on QWE, so qualifying work experience, and it is, what can count as QWE and how can you get it?
Okay, so one of the things that the SRA, our regulatory body, this is Regulation Authority, was trying to achieve in introducing the SQE as the new national licensing exam for solicitors to qualify, was to try and remove the bottleneck to qualification, which was getting the training contract. So they were trying to make it easier for well-qualified people who are going to be good solicitors to actually get that qualification if they couldn't actually achieve a training contract. And so qualifying work experience can be obtained in a much wider variety of sources than the training contract, because for a training contract provider, so usually a law firm, had to be regulated and authorised by the SRA to give that training contract. And one of the things, for example, that they had to do was to be able to give their trainees experience in different areas of law. So generally go through 3 seats, so a litigation seat, a non-contentious seat, that sort of thing. With qualifying work experience, there is no longer that requirement for the firm firm or body that's offering the qualifying work experience to be regulated in the same way by the SRA. And that means that more places will be able to offer qualifying work experience. So particularly in areas, things like social justice, where you might have, say, a criminal law firm that only does criminal law, they would not have been able to offer a training contract in the past because they wouldn't have been able to give you enough seats. They will be able to offer qualifying work experience. So will potentially pro bono clinics. So you might even be able to get qualifying work experience before you even start on your SQE journey proper, if you've managed to get some experience in your university's pro bono clinic or a work placement or something like that during your degree. It can be obtained from voluntary charitable organisations now at a law centre. Working as a paralegal can also count towards qualifying work experience, as well as the more traditional style training contract, as I talked about right at the very beginning, if you're lucky enough to be sponsored by a firm. So all of those things can count towards qualifying work experience, and you can obtain your qualifying work experience from up to 4 different organisations and sources. So you could get some perhaps whilst you're actually an undergraduate, perhaps in a pro bono clinic, that type of thing, or a legal clinic. You might then be able to get some working as a paralegal between graduation and actually sitting your SQE1 exam, and then some between SQE1 and SQE2, and then possibly some after SQE2. It can be achieved at any point in the journey. So it could all be after SQE2, it could all be before you even start SQE1. At any point, that qualifying work experience would be available. And it has to be signed off by a solicitor who is on the roll in England and Wales, but your qualifying work experience could be obtained outside the UK. So it could be obtained working abroad, so long as it is signed off by an English or Welsh solicitor. And they're actually signing you off to say that you have had the opportunity to be exposed to the competencies, and those competencies are on the SRA's website, and they set out what the skills a newly qualified solicitor should be able to do. So it's things like interviewing clients, drafting, writing, that sort of thing. However, you don't have to have achieved all of those competencies. And in fact, when you're signed off, you're not signed off as actually competent in those competencies. That might sound a little bit strange, but the reason for that is that actually what tests whether your competencies and those skills are actually at the level that a newly qualified solicitor needs to be are the SQE assessments themselves. So SQE1 is a multiple choice test, which is testing knowledge and application of that knowledge. SQE2 is a skills-based test where you actually have to do interviews, you have to prepare advocacy presentations, you have to do legal writing and legal research and so on. So it's actually SQE2 which signs you off as competent in all of those skills, ready to be a day one solicitor, not your period of qualifying work experience. That is just saying that you've actually had those opportunities to be exposed to those competencies. And obviously, as a student going through that qualifying work experience, what you want to be doing is you want to be logging all of the time and the experience that you're actually getting during your qualifying work experience, because that will provide you a portfolio for when you're actually going for a newly qualified job of what you've actually done during those 2 years. And also, if you're doing your qualifying work experience with different organisations, it can show you where your gaps are and where you actually want to try and get some experience in those other competencies as you're moving between organisations. And one of the things that BARBRI has done is that we are partnered with CILEx, and they have a qualifying work experience diary, which is absolutely fantastic. It's available online, and it enables you to log everything that you've done and how you're actually achieving and being exposed to those competencies. And all of our BARBRI students will have access to that diary to enable them to log their qualifying work experience as they're going through achieving and counting down that 2 years qualifying work experience to be able to apply for admission as a solicitor.
Thank you, Tracy. Hope that's answered a few questions there on the QWE. The next one I have is on funding and what funding options are available for the SQE.
Okay, so obviously depending on where you're going to a provider, there will be some providers who will be wrapping up the whole of SQE 1 and 2 within probably a master's, and so you would be able to potentially apply for student finance funding there. Although one thing that you do have to bear in mind is that another difference with SQE compared to LPC is SQE is a national licensing exam, and so therefore the exam is run by Kaplan on behalf of the SRA. Currently on the LPC, each provider actually sets their own LPC exams and marks them and passes or fails their own students. There's now going to be this central exam run by Kaplan, and so therefore all students will have to pay exam fees to Kaplan to actually sit the exams, and the fees for SQE1 are £1,558, and for SQE2 they are £2,422. Just turning around there to look at my big list on my wall where I've actually written down the exam fees. So even if you've got student finance, you would have to pay those exam fees on top of the cost to your provider. For BARBRI, we are not offering a master's program. We are simply offering SQE1 prep programs and SQE2 prep programs, and the fees for our courses for SQE1, it's £2,999 for the course to prepare you for SQE1. We do have instalment options for our programs. So for SQE1, for example, we run a 40-week program, a 20-week program, and a 10-week program to prepare you for the exams, and over the same price for all of the programs, but we have an instalment option. So if you are doing the 40-week program, you can pay in 8 instalments, the 20-week program you can pay in 3 instalments, and the 10-week program you can pay in 2 instalments. We also have partnered with some lending institutions, Future Finance and Lendwise, so you can actually borrow the money to pay for your course if that's an option for you. And we do have some scholarships available. All the details are on our website. Currently, we have a scholarship for people who are going to be involved in sort of social justice style work, which is a £600 discount on our fees. If you we have a merit-based scholarship based on if you get a first on your undergraduate degree, which is £1,500 reduction in the fees, and then we also had are running an essay competition, how one lawyer can change the world, which the winners of that will get either a full or some partial exemption of the fees. So we do have some details of scholarships which are all available on our website, and in fact most of the information that I'm actually telling you today is available on our website as well, so you can always go to that to check any of this information.
That's great. A link will be sent out after this webinar to our website, so you can access all that information from there. Okay, the next question I've got here is what support will you get specifically from BARBRI as part of your SQE course?
Okay, so as I said, you get all of the materials available on your PSP, and you can access those at any point. But the other thing that you actually get as a BARBRI student is you get access to a mentor. So you will be partnered with a tutor for your course, and that tutor will be available to support you through the course. So we don't have the same sort of classroom arrangement as you might have had at undergraduate level. One of the reasons for that is any time that you teach in a classroom, you are always teaching to basically to the middle of your class. So there's always half the people in your class think that as a lecturer or as a tutor, you are going too slowly, and the other half think that you're going too fast. With the PSP, you can work through all of those materials at your own pace. So we give you a guide of how long we think it's going to take you to do particular reading or to watch particular lectures, but that's an average. So, you know, you can go as quickly or as slowly as you need to. However, you will be getting this mentor, and the mentor will reach out to you at least every 2 weeks through the 40-week course. So we're starting our first 40-week course on Monday. So those mentors will be in contact with their students at least every fortnight through that 40-week course to check on their progress. The mentor will have access to your PSP, so therefore they can see where you're up to, whether you're on track, whether you're ahead, whether you're behind. They will contact you and either confirm that you're completely on track, or if you're falling behind, they'll be getting in touch with you to see, is there a reason for that? How can they help you? You can discuss strategy with them, how to fit the work into your general day. So they're almost a little bit like a life coach as well. And their whole focus is actually getting you through the course and getting you through the exam with that individual help rather than in the whole classroom. We do also have some workshops. There will be 7 workshops across the course, and they don't cover the law areas. Instead, they cover the skills around getting through the SQE. So the first one is obviously how to start and that type of thing. Then we have ones that are on multiple choice strategy. We have a couple of mindfulness ones, because obviously if you're doing this course and you're also working, or if you're doing a very intensive 10-week course, there's issues around making sure that you can actually get through the course, stay healthy, that type of thing. And then we have sessions on how to prepare for the mocks, how to analyze your mock results after you've done them, and then how to prepare for the final exam as well. Those workshops are available in real time, so you can actually join them. They're obviously over the internet, but you can actually join them as you are joining this webinar now, and then they'll be recorded and you'll have access to them afterwards. So if you can't attend the real-time one, you can watch the recording, or if you want to go back to anything that somebody told you during that workshop, you can go back to the recording as well. Okay. And sorry, Maya, but there was another thing I was just going to say. And as well as your tutor reaching out to you at least every fortnight, we will also be running office hours, which will be a time when, similar to the sort of thing that you might have if anybody actually did have face-to-face tuition at the moment, which I nobody does, but if you did, the sort of thing when your professor might say, my door is always open from 11 till 12 on a Thursday for if anybody just wants to call in and see me. That's what office hours will be available. So there will be a tutor who will be available on those points, and you can just drop in to see them virtually rather than face to face if you've got a question, or obviously you can always contact your mentor. Sorry, Maya, that was all I was going to say.
No, that's okay. And now I'm just going to look over questions that we've been receiving, and we're going to try to answer as many of those as we can. First one is around QWE. So we've got one here about a person who graduated with a non-law degree in 2016 and have been working in finance since then. They're looking to do the SQE part-time, but concerned about the work experience side of things. Realistically, what work experience could I do with a non-law degree while studying for the SQE?
It will depend on the organisation, obviously. In relation to paralegals, it's likely that a paralegal job, they would want you to have some legal knowledge, so perhaps have at least passed the SQE1 before they would take you on as a paralegal. However, you might be able to get voluntary work, in a citizens advice bureau or a legal a law centre, that type of thing, that might be available to you. And one of the things that you can actually do if you've got, I would always suggest, if you've got no links whatsoever to the law, any links that you've got, anybody that's a lawyer, try and speak to them. if you have absolutely no links whatsoever to the profession, then probably the best thing to do, I would suggest, is to, and obviously it might not be available at the moment with COVID, but to actually go down to your local court. Because most courts, one of the things that we have in this country is a transparency of our justice system. So most courts are actually available to the public, for the public to actually watch the court proceedings. It's a fundamental sort of principle of justice. There are some courts which are shut, usually youth courts, some matrimonial ones, and sort of care proceedings, that type of thing. And obviously some are closed, some sort of terrorism ones or that type of thing. But the vast majority of our legal proceedings must be conducted in open court that the public is allowed to actually watch. So if you've got no experience and no links whatsoever to the law, then one of the useful things to do is to actually go down to your local court and actually ask the ushers what cases you can watch in that particular day. And they're usually pretty friendly people there. So if you sort of talk to the ushers, they're likely to introduce you. If you ask them, they might introduce you to some of the lawyers who are actually at court and are actually presenting cases and advocating for their clients. There'll be recesses and that type of thing. And most lawyers, I would say, they generally tend to like talking about themselves. Most lawyers aren't desperately shy people, that sort of thing. So if you can actually be introduced to any of those lawyers, you can ask them about how did they get into the law. Is there any possibility that you could actually, shadow them at work or something like that? Or do they know anyone else who would let you do that? So you're actually starting to develop some sort of networks, that type of thing. Go on things like LinkedIn, look at what access you can get. There are people there who will mentor and will give you some experience, that sort of thing. So anything that you can actually get to get those links into the profession can help you.
Perfect. I hope that's answered that question. The next one is on QWE as well. I'm going to try to bunch a lot of these together, so we'll go through it by topic. So we've got a law graduate here who moved to Nigeria and they've been practicing there for the last 5 years. Would I have any exemptions, or would I still need to do the 2 years of work experience?
It would depend on what your status is in Nigeria. So if you're actually qualified as a foreign lawyer, so you are actually qualified as a Nigerian lawyer, then you would, well, currently you would use the QLTS, which is, there's one more MCT exam for the QLTS, which is in July of this year, and we do run courses to prepare people for QLTS as well. After QLTS finishes, so the last MCT course is the last MCT exam is in July, then you would have to go on to the SQE. And for foreign qualified lawyers, what they have to do is they have to pass SQE1 and SQE2 unless they can show, there is the possibility for exemptions, but you would have to show that you had equivalent knowledge and experience. And basically SQE is what used to be in an undergraduate law degree, a qualifying law degree, or the GDL plus stage 1 of the LPC. So that's quite a lot of knowledge and experience to actually have. So if you can show that you have got that, you might be able to get an exemption, but it's going to be quite difficult for people to get exemptions because you can't get exemptions of just part of the SQE. It's got to be, you could get an exemption of from FLK1 or FLK2, but it's actually quite a lot of subjects. You couldn't just say, oh, look, I've done the equivalent of tort and get an exemption for that or something. But if you are a foreign qualified lawyer, you can't get any exemptions for SQ1 and SQE2, you would have to do those assessments, but you wouldn't have to do QWE as a foreign qualified lawyer. So if you are already qualified in a jurisdiction that is recognised by the SRA, then you would just have to do SQ1 and SQ2, but not the QWE part of it. Oh, and have the character and suitability requirements, but that shouldn't be an issue.
I think you've already answered this when you were talking about QWE, but can you do your QWE whilst obtaining your law degree, or do you have to graduate before your QWE counts?
No, you can do basically any of it in any order. The only prescribed order for the whole of this regime is that you must have passed your SQE1 assessment before you can do SQE2. But qualifying work experience can be done at any stage, so all before, all after, some combination of it. So the only things that are actually completely linear that must happen in order is that you must have taken and passed SQE1 before you can enroll, the SQE1 exam before you can enroll for the SQE2 assessment.
Thank you. The next one is, once you're a qualified solicitor, would you specialise in the one area of QWE that you gained? And what if you wanted to specialise in a different area? Would you be able to specialise in a different area from your QWE?
Well, obviously that's going to depend on where you're actually going from and to, okay? And you might have to make a number of smaller steps to get across from one to the other, but it's not impossible. It's obviously going to be, I would say, easier to get a newly qualified job in the area that you have a lot of experience in your qualifying work experience, because on your CV and so on, you're going to be able to talk about examples of when you've done those particular jobs and that type of thing. But people do change specialisation, not just at newly qualified level, but even at 2, 3 and further qualified. People go into different areas either because new areas open up or because you know, there's a change. So you know, in the early 90s, for example, massive property recession, a lot of property lawyers switched from property into insolvency, which was suddenly a much more booming area, that type of thing. So there is the possibility to move across. And it's going to be, what can you do to show that your skills are attractive to your new employer for the job that you're actually going to. And you might have to, as I say, do it in stages. So, you know, get some experience at a lower level at one point before you can actually start applying for those newly qualified jobs, something like that.
Thank you. The next one is, if you have previous experience, i.e. a paralegal job or advocacy work, but it was not signed off as QWE at the time, can that still count towards the QWE for the SQE?
So long as you can go back to whoever was supervising you at that point and get them to sign you off, yes. So it doesn't matter that you did your qualifying work experience before the SQE regime came into force, it can still count, but obviously you do need it to be signed off by a solicitor of England and Wales. So if it was with a former employer or something like that, you would have to get back in touch with them to see whether or not anybody could sign it off for you. And the person who signs it off is signing it off to say that you have actually been involved in that organisation doing qualifying work experience for whatever period of time it was, and that you were exposed to those competencies. So past QWE can still count, but it's going to be a matter of getting back in touch with them and seeing whether or not anybody will is still in that organisation who worked with you, who can actually sign you off.
That's okay. And just on building on from that, if the person who signed you off is now moved to a different organisation, can they still sign you off for that period of time when you were both at that organisation?
Yes, so long as they're still on the roll.
Okay.
Of solicitors, yeah.
That's perfect. On the SQE itself now, do we have enough time to prepare until November, considering that the material is comparable to a compressed GDL and LPC?
Yes, you do. Obviously, there is a lot of material to get through. Our 40-week course, we say that you're going to be working an average of about 10 hours a week from now through to November. And the reason that you can actually do that preparation course within that time is because our preparation course is focused on the SQE and actually what you need to know to get through the SQE. Whereas a law degree, and to a certain extent an LPC contains material that is not covered by the SQE. So as an example, the SQE examines you on what the law actually is at the moment. Okay, although the SRA are considering whether or not they're actually going to do it on the date of the exam, and hopefully they will bring it forward by at least a month to say this is a cut-off point, so that we don't have a situation where there's a Supreme Court judgment the day before the exam and everyone's panicking about whether they need to know it or whatever. But basically, it examines you on the state of the law at the moment. It doesn't examine you on how the law might change in the future. It doesn't examine you on whether the law is fair or whether or not you think there should be changes to the law. So a lot of that sort of work that you might have done in your law degree, that's more that sort of critical analysis. You know, you've probably all written essays on whether or not you think a particular law is fair, whether it should be changed, that sort of stuff, or development of the law, or particularly the historical situation in the law. So for generally in a university, if you teach something like contract, then you start on, you know, historically what's happened, and you go through the development of the law and so on to what it actually is now. We don't do that. We just teach you the law that you actually need to know that will be examined. Another example is that the SRA say that for SQE, they do not expect people to be able to quote cases or legislation, because it's a closed book exam of what a newly qualified lawyer would know on day one without having to look something up. So therefore, they expect you to know what the principles of the law is and how to actually apply it, but not what the citation of a case is, or what the actual section in the legislation is, unless it's something that is used so much in the profession generally that it's used as a sort of definition. So a case, for example, that could come up would be, what's the rule in Ryans and Fletcher? Because that is just used as the sort of shorthand for that particular type of law. But apart from that, you don't need to know all of those previous case laws and all of the section numbers and so on in the legislation, or even that, for example, business law comes from the Companies Act 2006. You just need to know what are the director's duties, how could they apply to this scenario that they give you, rather than that it's section 177 of the Companies Act that is relevant here, or section 175, or that type of thing. So therefore, all of that information that is in your law degree, and you know, in an LPC, when they if they offer it as a master's, you've got to have some form of dissertation to satisfy what is actually level 7 of a degree. That's not actually relevant to the SQE exam. You won't have to actually do that in the exam. So we don't have any of that in our course. So just focusing on what you actually need to know for the exam to be a newly qualified solicitor, a competent newly qualified solicitor, means that you can cover that material in that time.
Thank you, Tracy. The next one is, what will happen after qualification from the SQE? Do you suggest applying for training contracts or associate roles instead?
Well, once you've passed SQE1, SQE2, got your qualifying work experience, you will actually then apply for admission as a solicitor. So you will be a newly qualified solicitor. But obviously, as you're going through getting your SQE1 and getting your SQE2, you will be obtaining your qualifying work experience, unless you're lucky enough to already have that. And so you'll be applying for roles that are appropriate for those positions. So, for example, somebody who'd asked before, what happened if you want, you know, your qualifying work experience was in one field and you wanted to move into another? If you knew, as you were being, for example, a paralegal, that maybe the area that you'd got that job in you didn't enjoy, that wasn't an area for you, you could then look for another paralegal job to get qualifying work experience in an area that was closer to the field that you wanted to go into, if not even that field. And that can again be another advantage, I think, of SQE, that you can do your qualifying work experience by potentially being a paralegal in different fields, and you're not committing to 2 years of a training contract that actually at the end of the first week you think, I really don't like this type of work, or I really don't like this sort of ethos of this firm or something like that, and then you're stuck there for the next 2 years. So it enables you to sort of try out different areas of law because they're so different. You know, something that you enjoy studying at university at undergraduate level might be very, very different when you actually get into practice. One of the examples I was given before about, you know, the sort of the history and the development, and, you know, is this law fair? Is this actually an equitable result for your clients? Often as a solicitor, you have no ability to actually change the law in many situations. I accept very few solicitors do who manage to take a case up to the Supreme Court, which changed it, but that is not general day-to-day work, you know, and even solicitors that do that, that's not every day that they're up in the Supreme Court changing the world. You know, usually that what you do as a solicitor is you're actually applying the rules that are already there, trying to get the best option for the best outcome for your client within the options that are available, but you are stuck with those rules that are there. And some people might find a subject that they really, really enjoyed at university. What they actually enjoyed was the sort of academic argument about where it could be going and that type of thing. Actually having to impose those rules, which maybe they feel are inequitable every day, can be sometimes a little bit soul destroying, so they might want to move into a different area. So it's usually very, very different to how you actually expect. Obviously it's nothing like Suits, sorry to sort of destroy anyone's perceptions, but it's nothing like that. Usually you've got many more cases on at any one time, and you don't usually get the opportunity to marry a prince at any point whatsoever. I've never met any solicitor who's been in that situation, but you know, who knows. So it's very, very different in practice, and you tend to find when you're teaching law that when people first come in, they always start off that they want to be barristers rather than solicitors, and they always want to be litigators rather than transactional lawyers. And then actually when they get into practice, it can change a little bit from that, because one of the things that you can find as a qualified solicitor, if you're in litigation, is you don't actually leave the office that much. Whereas another area, like for example commercial property, which people tend to think is not necessarily as interesting in academic level when they're dealing with land law. Most people have got a cold flannel on the forehead and in a darkened room when they're trying to actually get through land law. Actually in practice, as a commercial property lawyer, you can be out and about, not with COVID obviously, but normally you're out and about, you're not actually at your desk a huge amount. So how it actually operates in practice is often very, very different from an academic stage. So, you know, people are going to be changing their minds, and going and doing that qualifying work experience and having that opportunity to move from organisation to organisation to find out what's the best fit for you, I think can be really useful, rather than tying yourself into a 2-year training contract and then potentially a job afterwards because they offer you it, and it not really being something that's really going to be a good fit with you. It, you know, it's not great for a happy life going forwards.
Thank you, Tracy. The next one I have is I've already started a GDL. Can I go straight to the SQE2 once I've completed this?
No. So if you have the GDL, then you would still have to do SQE1 and SQE2. If you have the LPC, there is the possibility to be exempt from SQE1 and just do SQE2 and qualifying work experience rather than the LPC and the training contract, but not with the GDL.
Sorry, we've got a question here. I seem to have lost it. There's just so many questions coming in. There we go. Would a pupillage count towards the qualifying work experience, thereby allowing a candidate to do qualify?
You know what? I've never been asked that question before. I'm just thinking about it. If you had been in that pupillage, had been exposed to the competencies that are on the SRA's website, then potentially, but the difficulty might be the sign off, because if you've been in a pupillage, then your pupil master will, I assume, be a barrister rather than a solicitor. So I think the difficulty there might be who could actually sign off your qualifying work experience. But you know what? I think that's something that you would actually have to check out with the SRA. I can't say definitely what the answer would be to that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I thought that was a really, really good question. Okay, next one I have is what about those students that are going through the CILEx route? What are their options when it comes to the SQE?
Okay, so at the moment, if you go through the CILEx route, once you get to the appropriate level, then you would do the LPC, wouldn't you? But you wouldn't have to do the training contract, or but you do have to do the PSP. I think PSC. I think that's the current approach for CILEx. The CILEx qualification itself will not give you exemption from SQE 1 or SQE 2. You would have to have the CILEx with the full practicing rights, which is an additional thing on top of the normal CILEx qualification, because that then means that you're a qualified lawyer and you would sort of get some exemptions in that situation. But normally, if you get to the sort of it used to be the fellow at CILEx. I'm not too sure if it's still the same that it used to be, but once you're a fellow at CILEx, then at the moment you would have the choice of either doing the LPC or doing SQE1 and SQE2. But by being CILEx, it's likely that you've already got your qualifying work experience, because you've probably already got that 2 years experience in those competencies and somebody that can actually sign it off. So you would do your CILEx and then you would do SQE1 and SQE2, but you wouldn't have to do your qualifying work experience because you would have already achieved it. So you do have to do it, but you would have already got over that hurdle by being in the situation that you are with CILEx.
Thank you. Next one is, can you enroll onto our prep courses at any time, or do you need to book an exam and then enroll onto the prep course with the specific exam date in mind? We would suggest that you would enroll into a prep course knowing which exam that you're actually going to do, because all of our prep courses basically get you to the point of, now I can sit the exam. And to be honest, with the amount of information that you are examined on, the scope of the SQE exams, which are huge, you will not be able to maintain that level of knowledge for months and months and months and months, because you know what it's like. Anytime that you're doing an exam, the week afterwards, not all of it is still there in your mind and so on. So we wouldn't suggest that you enroll on a course just thinking, oh, well, I'll do the exam at some point in the future, because all of our courses are focused. So as I say, the course that's starting next week is focused for the first exam on the 8th and the 11th of November this year, and then we'll be running other courses ready for the May exam and so on. But depending on which course it is, you wouldn't have enrolled for the exam before you actually start on the course, because at the moment the portal to enroll in the exam isn't even open yet in Kaplan. That's not even going to be opening until the spring, and you won't even be able to enroll on the November exam until the July. So you would start our course before you actually enroll on the exam. Different on maybe the 20 and the 10-week courses, because enrolment should be available by then. So you might have enrolled on the course before you actually enrolled on the exam before you start the courses. But as you're actually thinking about, right, when am I going to do the exam, that's when you're then working back almost to the course to prepare you for that particular exam. Perfect. I'm going to try and pick up 2 questions, only just conscious of time. But the next one is, I have completed my undergraduate in law and completed the LPC. Would I only need to complete the QWE in order to fully qualify as a solicitor? And is there a cut-off point for using previous legal work experience in the past?
No, if you've got the LPC, then you are in what's called the transitional stage. So that means that you do have a choice. So you could continue, and if you were lucky enough to get a training contract, qualify that way. If you couldn't get a training contract and wanted to use qualifying work experience instead, then the LPC would gain you exemption from SQE1, but you would still have to do SQE2.
That's great. And last question before I hand back over to Beth is, does it need to be a solicitor to sign off QWE? What if you worked in a law clinic and your supervisor was not a qualified solicitor?
It does need to be a solicitor who signs off, but most law clinics will have a solicitor either sort of at the top of the law clinic, if you see what I mean, or that they will have a solicitor outside the organisation that they can refer things to and so on. Obviously the solicitor that's signing you off needs to know that you've actually been doing that work, but you don't necessarily have to have been doing the work specifically for them. You could have had another supervisor between you and the solicitor. So for example, with the flex situation, it will be if you go through the sort of flex route, then flex actually match paralegals to gaps in practice. So people come to them and say, oh, we need somebody for 6 months to do some corporate work for us, or we need somebody for 12 months to do some personal injury for us, or whatever. So they will then find a student who fits and sort of, you know, match those the things together. It would actually be Flex who would sign off your overall qualifying work experience. So they haven't actually been the solicitor who's been working with you necessarily in practice, but because they've got the diary and the links through, they will be happy to actually sign that off. So there might be a way for your law clinic that it won't necessarily be your immediate supervisor, but somebody further up who might be able to sign you off in that situation.
That's perfect. And I think that's all we've got time for today. I'm just going to hand back over to Beth.
Yes, thank you very much. And I know there's been so many questions that we haven't been able to answer them all. So just to say, a link to BARBRI's SQE page will be sent around tomorrow. So if you've got any questions about BARBRI specifically and what they're doing for the SQE, you can check that out. Don't forget on Law Careers Net, if you've got more general SQE questions, we have loads of content, and I'm sure we'll get some more ideas for content from all the questions that you've been sending through today. So do keep an eye out there. And just for a few people who've sent through really kind of personal questions about their own personal circumstances, would just recommend checking with an SRA because that's always going to be the best place to get your answer if you have a very particular situation. So thank you very much to Mayambo and Tracy for today. Before you go, just another reminder to you all that we'll be sending out a link containing this recorded session tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that, and a survey will be popping up as well once this webinar has ended, so please fill that in to let us know how you've enjoyed today and what other topics we and perhaps BARBRI as well could be covering in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.